All right. I think this is the beginning of intro to game design. So after the boot camp, first session to give you tools how to move forward with your games in GameCity Kajaani. Last time there was only a brief introduction, so I thought I open up a bit more of my background at the beginning, so you can ask more questions privately if you have something on my background that you want me to cover. So let's start. Who is talking? So my name is Jussi Autio, and usually if I need to put myself into one sentence, it is that I am a business-oriented game designer, as those cover pretty much what I've done. This year it's 20 years in the business. I started in 2006. Over the years, I've started 6 companies, even though starting my first company is still the scariest thing I've ever done. Nowadays, I treat business ideas as tools, and even currently, I have 3 business ideas up and running. So they are just tools. The 6 companies doesn't mean that they would have always been primary things, but rather indeed that starting a business is not that big of a deal to me as they used to. I've been CEO 3 times, and I've been a game designer in 4 different companies. And as a game designer, I've published roughly a dozen different games. That number could be easily doubled as I have been consulting companies quite a bit. Do I dare take any credit out of those? Maybe not. Then there is a lot of prototypes, maybe soft launches, and so forth that I've done, but at least a dozen published game that ended up on the hands of players. On top of that, I've done consulting and business coaching. I designed what ran for 8 years, Oulu GameLAB, which at one stage was selected as the best youth incubator in the world. Over the years, I've helped over 40 game companies get established in 4 different countries. Out of those, most exciting thing was helping first wave game entrepreneurs in Saudi Arabia, where I helped 15 game companies get established, out of which 6 had women CEOs. And I've held lectures in 11 different countries relating to games. As a CEO and producer, I have been gathering some funding, public, private, publisher, investor. Most fun job I've ever had was being a producer to a serious game company where I was doing my part to help 10 people startup cooperate with a medical giant that had annual revenue of 10 billion euros. So that was interesting. Currently, indeed, I am a CEO at Silver Legend. So after a relatively long pause, I'm back to back to leading a company. I also teach game design at Oulu University, and via Yeta Consulting, I'm doing this thing for you guys. But still, last time to mention, because that contract came to an end, but I also helped Lapland University get established a game business course. So that's now what they're running on their own. Anyways, one main element that hopefully I am giving now tools for you guys is to help bringing ideas into concepts into high level design, and then helping your development, doing level design, and then polishing and balancing, and later lectures also providing tools how to make sure that whatever vision you have is one vision, that the different members of the team doesn't pull it to different directions. That is surprisingly important elements, but today's topic is more of design principles, and then later on design tools how to make sure that the vision is shared. Going back still to the boot camp session and extending tiny bit to Jay's field, but I feel like I should highlight the typical development cycle, uh, which game industry, at least when it comes to publisher driven business, which I have tended to use in my earlier career, follows. So typically, idea is developed into a concept. You have a pitch deck, maybe a mock-up video, and then you start making a demo. My strong suggestion is that you start selling, promoting your game, reaching out to financiers already at the concept stage. And typically, at some stage, when you have a cool demo, project is signed. Depending a bit on the company, established companies that are selling many different concepts or demos. It is the signing of a project is followed by pre-production, where that demo is abandoned and everything starts from scratch. The logic here is that if you want to minimize your risks, you make a demo that's basically barely keeping it together because you've done everything rough and dirty just to highlight how the game will be. Then that's not the basis upon which you want to be building on. Oftentimes, for fresh startups, it could be that you are going to make this game no matter what. Then you shouldn't make a rough and dirty demo. Then you should be building the foundation so that when the project is signed, you don't abandon work. In the lectures, I will be talking about pre-production, production, and some terms like vertical slice. So I want to open those terms as well. So typically pre-production stage, which you guys have entered now, is the stage to plan things. Plan your production pipeline. So when are you doing what? Uh, Plan your game mechanics, doing a game design document. Uh, Artists probably establish the visual identity of the game, and so forth. And the school book explanation for end of pre-production is when you have your first playable. So now you can play. Well, obviously, if you are building on top of your demo, then you might have a playable already before that. That's perfectly fine. Uh, these are quite important elements also if we're looking into the long future of signing with a publisher. Often the end of pre-production has special first playable milestone that might have special rights for the publisher and so forth. After pre-production comes production stage, which is basically the development stage. And how long that is totally up to the game that you're making. It can be 9 years, like in Star Citizen, or it can be 1 month, like Klaus's games. So production stage depends totally on the project that you're making. Vertical slice, I probably don't refer to it on this session, but on future sessions I might refer to that. Vertical slice as a term dictates like a 5-minute slice that gives you final quality impression how the game will be. The key element here is that it should have the look and feel of a final game. However, same as with alpha and beta, depending on what games you make, that might be trickier. But typical, let's say a shooter game where you get most of the game mechanics already from engine example projects, vertical slice means that you have 1/3 of a level, that one special thing that makes your shooter different, but in 5 minutes you get the feel that, okay, we have this now gravity gun or whatever would be the main thing. School book example, for strategy games, for vertical slice would mean that 80% of the game is done, even if it's 5-minute slice, because mechanics driven or system soup games tend to require all mechanics to work before you have the final experience. Hence, vertical slice definitions become a big thing to discuss with your publisher that, okay, what do you mean by that? Same as with alpha. Typically, it means features are done, only content creation remains, and beta means that also content is done, and now polish stage and balancing stage follows. But with strategy games, they would be so close to one another. So in strategy games, typical explanation for alpha is that, okay, now you can win the game, so you can play it through. And beta is that, okay, now all features are done, and then balancing and polishing. So once again, varies heavily on what you make. And if you are planning to make mobile free to play games, live ops, soft launches, and others would need to be there as well. Uh, the different design principles that we will be heading towards are particularly useful in the concept demo and early stage production stages. Later on, there will be those guidelines that will help you make the right micro decisions, whether it's how code works or what sort of levels to do and so forth. But the first session is more systematic approach on getting everything up and running. Now, before I jump into the beef, I still do want to remind you of the exercise or mental exercise that we did about how fearless the competition is. So, as a motivation, today's session gives you tools how to tackle exactly this problematic, that your game would be as high quality as possible so that when it's on the bottom shelf of the distant corner in Steam, that whoever grabs it will have a good time. However, indeed, game alone is not enough. So just to put it out there, in the same things as on I said on Sunday, 1% in mobile takes 93% of income, and it doesn't mean that 99% of the games are bad. Back in the days when mobilegames.biz website listed all the games out there, last time I checked, it was 1,005,000 different games. That's not up there anymore, so I can't update that figure, but most likely it is roughly that type of amount. For PC, as you hopefully saw on Sunday, it's easiest to evaluate if the game idea is viable. But that exercise, which I focused on Sunday, doesn't really say anything about the quality of design. But there is roughly 100,000 games, so it's basically 10 times more manageable than the amount of games that you fight against in mobile. That being said, console games would be the most smart thing to do, but that is not an open platform. You need connections to the console manufacturers, and they are still gatekeepers, often requiring also publishers to be the middlemen. But judging from Remedy's one of the public listings, the reports, there is few thousand relevant games out there. But if your game fits for consoles, that's really smart, viable thing where to aim your game for. But you can't guarantee there that it, if you finish it, it will be available. Now, with some of the themes, we did discuss this, but in game business, there is a heavy survival bias, which I now want to express to all of you. Basically, what survival bias means is that, well, the historical background is in Second World War, on Battle of Britain, when Britain was fighting Germany over the chance of Nazis attacking England. And the military was doing maths that, okay, out of the planes that arrive back, these are the places where our planes are shot. So the military thought of enhancing the airplanes where they had been shot. Luckily, a mathematician entered the scene and said that no, this is not all planes that came home. Those that were shot down uh, are not in the list. So most likely, what you need to enhance is the where those planes weren't shot because they managed to get back home. Me personally, listening to myself and other mentors, I often see that we easily remember to share stories where our planes or our companies were shot, where we had trouble, where we struggled and almost went bankrupt or almost failed, but we're a lot worse on explaining where we weren't hit. And analyzing where you weren't hit, I feel, is a lot more fruitful. I have separate sessions on this, uh, but I want to highlight this because quite often, what were my success cases, not just me, but other people as well, that often is left unsaid. And I feel game design is one of the key elements that can make your journey a lot easier. And how to be successful when it comes to what sort of games you make already in the idea stage, there is a lots of different approaches before going into the design principles. One would be Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Sure, it's not science anymore, but already here in Maslow's hierarchy, you can see basic gameplay effects at play. And as it's basically hierarchy of needs, we are psychologically uh, adapted to care about these kind of things. Already with the basic needs, physiological needs, food, water, warmth, and rest, as well as security, safety, or safety needs, those are like basic survival games. It's quite easy to see many games focusing on those. Action games where you fight against one another, sure, safety needs are at play there. Not all focus on the bottom of the hierarchy of needs, many focus on safety needs. Easy to see that, okay, this resonates. But I bring this up because you could just as well focus on the psychological needs, on friendships, love, belongingness, esteem. You boost feeling of accomplishments with the reward mechanics and so forth, or self fulfillment needs where you create something, show how you would build this city or how you would do something awesome. Another approach which I will be very heavily emphasizing, particularly on one on ones, is your unique selling points. What makes your game stand out? It doesn't have to be all round, no one has ever made this type of game, but rather, what is the angle that you're providing to this genre or mechanics that no other game has ever done? Typically, worst idea to do is doing a platformer type of game as everyone is making. It's one of the most saturated genres out there. But if your platformer platformer type of game is the first one that simulates all the pictures, all the pixels in the game, that transforms the experience, that you might have a winning hand at play then, as was the case with Noita, which was made by three people and has sold a shit ton of copies. Sorry about my French. So best way to approach is that, okay, what can we bring to this genre that transforms this experience into something totally new? The stronger the unique selling point, the better. And rarely, very rarely, story or setting or atmosphere is that. It could be that this is a first game about uh, not not managing to have a child, but in a new genre, then that could be a unique selling point. It has a clear target audience. For example, for my games in my previous career, I was pitching and selling XCOM style game, so turn-based tactical games where you typically run from cover to cover to outflank the enemies and kill them. I was pitching a game where we do all that, but so that the melee is the star, so that punching people in the face and kicking them in the nuts is as tactical as in XCOM. And that we managed to sell without needing to have a prototype to prove that. So strong unique selling point helps every step of the way. Another element, how you could approach ideation, but definitely later on we're going to have separate session and actually also a workshop, is understanding the audience. I'm going to steal my own thunder from 2 weeks now by telling that playing video games is a bit like identity politics, meaning that the type of games we like to play is dependent on who we are as people. To summarize, Quantic Foundry has adapted personality tests into domains of play, analyzed over 1.5 million different players, and they found out that depending on who we are as people, these 12 different motivations dictate what type of games we like. So these 12 player motivations appeal to us differently. And they even have archetypes that, okay, if you're a bard, you're going to enjoy story motivation and fantasy motivation, discovery and design quite a lot. Uh, to some extent, excitement, but not so much community and competition, and not so much challenge, and so forth. You can do your own test if you want by going to the Quantic Foundry site and learn more about it. However, I personally feel that focusing on what is important in our game, how much are we serving each of these player motivations, is a great tool how to start digging deeper. What type of game are we going to make? But don't worry, we're going to dig deeper into this. But what I'm trying to say is that design is the key to win. Doing a good design will help uh, avoid trouble ahead and uh, try to find audience that actually enjoys your game. But the best design is not just best design on paper, but best design is something that your team can deliver. Now, we are going to emphasize scope in this program so that first game that you make shouldn't be enormously big. So what this means that if you're dreaming about epic space battles where you can uh, develop your own ship, upgrade it, there is space battle as well as fights inside the space, and there is grand adventures and so forth, you can still do it as long as it's not this. This is Star Citizen, uh, the most expensive game ever not made. I don't think it's ready yet, even though sure it's already playable, but it's not finished. I don't know, something like 700 millions it has cost, and it's a mystery how people keep funding that game. But to consider that this is so big that even 500 people for 7 years isn't enough to make this game has exactly the same stuff. This one was made by 2 people plus a sound designer. And it has epic space battles. It has boarding parties, as you can see. You can upgrade your ships and you go on grand adventures around different planets and stars and so forth. So high level concept, very similar, but how to do it, this can be done by 2 people. The other one couldn't have been done by 500 people or however many. So think about scope. And this is an enormously successful game as well. For 2 people game, if I'm not mistaken, it has sold over $40 million worth of copies. Something like, I think 4 million copies sold or something. Don't quote me on that one yet. I don't remember all the numbers out of the back of my head. Another element is that if you do cool design that is easy to learn, you could do something like this that allows you to then go on more familiar genres like this. I hope the sound is playing as well. Arvi Teijari made this game a few years back before Noita, and he earned millions with this game back in 2017, and then he and 2 others could easily focus on making bigger game, which is still doable with 3 people, but they didn't have any monetary issues because each of them had made a successful small game on their own. So if you are still pondering what type of game are you making, I recommend something simple but profound so that you have a unique selling point. Now, jumping more towards the game design itself, I'm definitely pro on learning from other industries like movies, music, books, and so forth. Those other art forms can trace back their roots to the Stone Age village where first stories are born, when humans tried to explain the world around them and, as a pastime, started telling stories. However, games background is not there in the Stone Age village. Games background goes a lot further. Games background is here. And what you basically see here is play. These kittens are in an epic conflict between true and not true, between being serious and being not serious at the same time. And this is very relevant to all game design as well. I'll explain in just a second. But imagine if one of the kittens bite too hard. It won't be anymore a play, it will be a fight. So the true wins the untrue, or real wins the not real. And if one of the kittens, or none of the kittens, oh, well, if it's 2 kittens, there seems to be 3 there. If one of them doesn't start playing along, then the not true wins and the play ends because, well, we're no longer in that flow of play, similar to video games. Now, why is this relevant? Is because it's exactly the same magical place we go when we're immersed into an actual gameplay. So imagine if we're sitting on a sofa playing a role-playing game or whatever, and then someone scares you from the kitchen and you click a button and you kill an innocent villager. If the world around you doesn't respond, meaning in the game world, doesn't respond that, hey, you just killed an innocent civilian, the not true wins. You exit the game world just like the kittens would. You realize that, this is just a silly game. I'm actually sitting on the sofa. I'm no longer immersed in the gameplay. And similarly, if you just saved the village and now everyone is referring back to standard slogans in the game, it similarly destroys that magic. That, hey, it's just a game. I'm in front of a computer. I'm no longer immersed into the actual gameplay world. So keep those kittens in mind when you are pondering how the game world needs to respond to the activities of the player. If I don't remember to hint towards that on the verb section, please remind me in the chat, because exactly how the you don't need to just design how the what the player does, what the player can do, but you also need to design how will the game world respond to those actions in order to keep this magical place alive. Now, as we discussed on Sunday, I have a huge knack on history, so I still do want to emphasize a bit of the heritage of games, that they have existed as long as culture has existed. And I want to highlight a couple of examples. What we know about ancient Egypt is pharaohs and pyramids and probably some camels later on, that cats were worshipped as gods. But in ancient Egypt, Senate boards have been found in pre-dynastic graves. Translation: pre-dynastic means before pharaohs, before the mighty pyramid. Sure, tombs were there already, but games in ancient Egypt is older than how we perceive ancient Egypt. And if we jump to Asia, to China, China was born in the Warring Stage period when Confucius was alive, and as well as Mo He and others. It was an era similar to ancient Greek in Europe. And when foundations of Chinese culture were being established, already three games were in the vogue. One of them is being still played. And even Confucius, he was against games, though. Uh, his comment was that I guess playing Liubo is better than not doing anything, but that's how much praise he had for games. But even he had to play Weiqi, which is Go in the modern times. And in ancient India, that's the home for three major religions. And sadly, the oldest genre listings comes from Buddha. Sadly, because it's actually a blacklist of different types of games and plays that he would not play, which, by the way, includes games like one player drawing a picture and others trying to guess what that is. So Buddha would not play Pictionary. First one is any games that are being played by 8x8 or 10x10 game board. So chess, Buddha would not play either. Now, the highest praise for games comes from 100 years back from Johann Huizinga, who claims exactly that cat example, that without that ability to be serious and not serious, being true and not true at the same time, we could not have abstract thinking. So without element of play, concepts like Finland could not exist. It's something that none of us can see. We can't take Finland into our hands, but it's still very, very real to all of us. So Johann Huizinga goes as far to say that without the element of play, culture is not possible. And last but not least is the fact that whenever new technology is invented, games are being adopted to it. Whether it's Doom being played on refrigerators or paper arriving to Europe, which explodes the number of games Europe saw, which was even further enhanced when printing press arrived 100 years later, or basically was invented. And coin op mechanics established first game companies, distribution models, and monetizing models, so that when video games were invented, coin operated mechanics was old news already. And last but not least, first game show was on TV 15 years before Finland got its first television shows. And with computers, it's easiest to see that when computers were invented. What were they used first? Well, for military warfare, those supercomputers. And what they put out was basically board games being used to train militaries, to train tactics. And those supercomputers pretty much instantly, almost instantly, started having games in there, which then gave birth to video game business as they jumped to consumer uh, devices. However, more related to today's topic is that beyond history, like archaeology, games and game design doesn't really have that long theoretical research on what makes games great. It's pretty much only in the 2000s that that research has started. So movies, music theory is a thing. Game theory is not really. Game theory has nothing to do with games. It's about basically a thought process of philosophical nature, not really how to make great games. Now, what are those games then? This bit I would love to be more interactive, but I think on Discord it's easier if I answer my own questions. Defining games is a lot more difficult than you would imagine. Personally, I feel that it would be a great service if we could establish some fundamentals what makes games games. But all the definitions tend to be either so broad that experimental theater is a game, or everything around us, like Johan Huizinga would say, is a game which won't help us make better games, or they are so narrow that games like City Skylines or The Sims drop out. That okay, is players own games giving a winning condition, is that a requirement for a game? Well, if we have a definition that it is, then a lot of video games are not really games. So a better question is that how does games differ from other art forms? Now here we find very fruitful topics. We can see that games as an art is interactive, whereas other art forms are passive. If we watch television, we are just observing, immersing in something that is given to us. In a game, we are interacting with the art form. It also means that the art itself is alive and players are active participants in that game, which also means that we don't have absolute control over the experience, but players are a crucial part of it. Now let's take another question, which is what is gameplay? Now, gameplay is a familiar term. I'm pretty sure always everyone raises their hand. I know I have heard of gameplay, but defining it is more challenging. And that's particularly important question because gameplay is king. So it is, I dare say, the single most important thing about the game that you're about to make is how is your gameplay. And to define gameplay is by saying that it is the interface through which player interacts with the game mechanics. Best it's described if you imagine a loading screen. If it does like this, that doesn't feel very polished, does it? Just teleporting there. But if it fades in and fades out, it feels more polished. Now, gameplay is exactly this, but with everything. Like everything that player interacts with the game. So it's not the same as art, it's not same as music, it's not same as story or controls, but combination of all that and the actual mechanics at play there and how player presses the button. How does it feel when I press a button. In that platformer, for example, does the character go down a bit and then jump, or does it instantly just go up? Probably feels more polished if if the animation goes a little bit down, and then the length of the jump depends on how long did the player keep that button pressed. That all is gameplay. Not to mention the shadow that should show that, okay, when the character comes down, it's gonna land here. So all that is gameplay. Equally important is to understand game mechanics. Now, game mechanics, on the other hand, they set the boundaries what this game is about. What is possible is dictated by game mechanics. And this decision for you guys, well, every game developer, is a key decision that what are the mechanics the player is using, because that is always where players' focus is. To one of the teams I did mention on Sunday that when other art forms on a family trip in a car, every other art form from music to literature, from theater to opera to movies, in every other art form, the viewer, listener, or whatnot is sitting on the passenger seat. They have their full brain capabilities, cognitive capabilities used on emerging on the surroundings. Oh, there is a beautiful rainbow over there. What a nice weather to have a picnic like that. Family is over there. Oh, what's that smell? It seems like someone is selling hot dogs over there. 100% of the brain is in that. But us at video games are the driver. So primarily, always the driver's first instinct is on the steering wheel. It's on the gearbox. It's the legs take their focus on throttle and brake and clutch, and the road gets enormously big attention of the brain, because what if a child runs over? What if that car is on the wrong lane? So majority of the cognitive capabilities are always in the mechanics. And when deciding what those mechanics are, is to decide where players' focus is. And the more of those mechanics are, the less brain capability is left to the other elements in the game. What this means basically is that if you have a story in your game, it needs to be the story that your mechanics support. Because where the player's focus is in the game mechanics, and then what decisions players do is always via mechanics. So even in story-driven games, game mechanics is how player interacts with the game. So let's take Walking Dead, for example, or any walking simulator, and I don't use walking simulator as a discriminatory term. Rather, why Walking Dead basically has some action sequences, but most of the mechanics is how you walk around, how you talk, how you interact with objects. Not very difficult to learn. Why it's still super successful is because it frees the brain to emerge in the story and uh, identify with the characters. And always the decisions still are made that, okay, there is an emergency, zombies are attacking. Do I go to save this character or that character? I start walking to that direction. Then it's still story is pushed forward by the game mechanics. Hence, if you're designing story-driven games, make sure that those mechanics are integral part of the story itself. Tell the type of story that your mechanics allow. Don't be one of those developers who put a lot of effort in story and then complain that players don't care about the story, which happens a lot. Most of the time, it's because story is delivered in cinematics and game mechanics have nothing to do with that. If you have a story, make sure that all that relates to the decisions in the story are done via mechanics, and best is if the story is driven forward by actions in the mechanics as well. That being said, in games, context and what the game is about is usually more important than the story. Tetris is a successful game and it has no story, and the most successful game series out there is about Italian plumber who eats mushrooms and jumps on top of animals to save a princess. So context is important. If Super Mario had laser weapons and time travel, it would still break the story or context because it's not part of that game world. So game world can still be important even if the story itself is silly. So once again, game mechanics is where player spends most of his time or her time. So when every one of us have a limited amount of cognitive capacity, consider where player is using it and keep that in mind all the time. Now, there is reasons why games explore relatively similar topics, often very action-oriented topics. So if you imagine a horror scenario, something horrible is about to happen. Your lecturer comes through your screen and starts murdering some people or whatever. That is the type of games we excel, and it's easy to see why action-oriented games are so successful because the lizard brain parts of our immersion are very easy to activate, the survival emotions. We need to be scared easily because maybe 99 times out of 100 that noise in the grassland is just the wind, but if one time it's a tiger and we're all dead, so we need to be quick to get scared or quick to get activated when it comes to survival. And a lot of games focus on survival kind of emotions. Of course, what differs from books and movies, where the reaction would be limited to freezing, in games we can trigger flight or fight reaction as and not so much the freezing, which is why movies, particularly movies, are like, oh, I'm so scared. And it's easy to see why, okay, I actually have to do something about it. It's more fun because it's not just the freezing, which is more rare in the lizard brain. However, games that focus solely on survival, then if you want to invoke some other emotions, social emotions, make sure that you put your player to spend time with those emotions. Uh, and that basically means that choose your mechanics so that player spends time dealing with those emotions or triggering them out. Because as said in the previous slide, where players' focus uh, is in the mechanics, and via that is how the emotions also rise. So even if you know that okay, we want to deliver this story, always consider gameplay first because that will set the boundaries how awesome your story might feel like. Okay, let's jump to another topic, which I already hinted towards. Uh, Players tend to say that games are a form of escapism. As I said, it's really closer to identity politics that we play the type of games based on how we are. And the basic principle behind that is in the Ocean personality test or Big Five, as it's also known. So, are we as people more practical, preferring routine, or are we more curious? Are we more careless and disorganized or more dependable and organized? Are we more quiet and reserved or outgoing and warm? Are we more critical, uncooperative, and suspicious, or more helpful, trusting, and empathetic? Fun fact, they didn't find correlation in the neuroticism, so the last bit of the ocean model, are we calm or are we anxious, that there was no correlation there. So why we play different types of games is not just escapism. That's basically 2 out of the 12 motivations. So these 12 different motivations, they also form clusters. So action cluster means that if someone likes destruction, very likely they also like excitement. If someone likes challenge, meaning big high difficulty levels and games that require practice, most likely they also like strategy. And if someone likes elaborate plots, interesting characters, they probably like fantasy as well. And here is indeed the cluster names as well. That's another way to look at the game design is the overall experience more about the player or about the game world? And is the experience happening in player's brain or is it more kinetic, more like roller coaster experience that I'm riding a roller coaster? So where are you aiming uh, with your game? More about the player or more about the world? More about things happening in imagination or more kinetic experience? All right. Uh, to emphasize, player is very different from a reader or movie watcher. The source material in books, movies, theater, opera always remains the same. We might identify differently for the characters, but we still see the same movie. I like that character, you like that character. I understood that character's motives that seem shallow, and to you it's something different. But the source material remains the same. For us, player always creates his or her own story, and the source material changes even in linear games. If there is health in the game and I come to this room with health almost zero, it might be the most memorable moment in my game, and you came with full health and you barely recognized that that room was such a big challenge, and that's with extremely linear example. So once again, player is active participant. So consider where they use those cognitive capabilities, and remember that in games, player agency is very important. Player agency, agenttuuri in Finnish or toimijuus in Finnish, basically means player's ability to influence his own character, and those decisions need to have understandable consequences into the game world. So the game world needs to respond uh, understandably. That cat example that I used earlier. So whatever killing of enemies or doing something, you need to make sure that how the game world responds fits as well. It's not just that, okay, I can do as a player these things, but the game world needs to respond as well. Now, there is possibilities to strip player of agency, same as in real world. Someone is hit by a car or someone gets cancer and so forth. So bad things happen. But if you constantly strip player of agency, it's a bad idea. Or if any important decision always happens outside of the actual mechanics, that will lead that players don't care about the story or the setting because no decision matters. So in short, when other media says show don't tell, that don't tell that this character is evil, but show them kicking a cat. Everyone will hate that character after that. For us, that phrase should be play, don't show. When these things are in conflict, then we have the stupid illusions that players don't like to read or players like to skip dialogue. Well, players like to play. They will skip dialogue that is only dialogue, only building exposition, and it isn't really playing. If only method is to get a quest marker onto the map, then skip takes place. For all the other players except bards who like the story and fantasy very heavily, they might like story even if it's just rub it in your face type of story. If dialogue is gamified, like Disco Elysium did, even before they did the director's cut, which brought voice acting to all dialogue, it had 1.2 million words in the game, more than all of Tolkien's production. And it was still a huge success because playing meant dialogue is part of it. I have to play dialogue. I don't just choose options, but I actually play dialogue. Then no one has a problem of reading. That being said, when you're thinking about who the player is, then also remember to consider how are you building sense of progression and ownership to that experience, that it's Jussi Autio's experience. How is it different from your experience if I was now player, not lecturer? And also one element is that to consider that how are you going to reward the player and build sense of accomplishment, that when player succeeds, how okay, I am back. It seems that just microphone being open doesn't really uh, work with this headphone. It shut itself down. You guys didn't say anything. This is first time it ever happened. Just said to doom. Huh. Kalle is writing something. How was the VB? I don't know what that means. But sorry about that. That was a bit. Welcome back. Yes. Luckily it made the sound, so I knew that. Okay, now my headset went off. It was perfect timing for that to happen because then more towards the ways to go forward from an idea. The previous, considering the cognitive capabilities, think of mechanics, think of how you build player experience, is a good starting place. But as I said, or as we wrote in the description of today's lecture, is that if the only tool you can use is a hammer, then everything looks like nails. Same is true with game design and game development. If only one approach is how you know how to use, then you can do one type of games. One example, which I strongly emphasize as it's basically where you need to go, is how does the game work as mechanics? So eventually you will need to be telling that, okay, this is how the game should work. Another low level kind of thinking aid is to consider how are you rewarding and what are you rewarding of the player and how are you building progression. Is the progression we are getting experience points and leveling up, maybe getting more difficult levels, that the match 3 elements just get more complicated, or is the story the key element that builds sense of a progression? Will you go to more epic places as the game goes forward and so forth? So consider these. But more unified approach is considering the verbs that your game is going to use. Verbs meaning what can the player do? Here, for example, the player can crouch, he can run, he can jump, he can open doors, he can interact with others, and he can aim and shoot, or she can aim and shoot, which is a typical shooter game's verbs. However, verb approach helps you early on focus where the player's brain is, and it keeps you in the controls of the game attitude. So I feel that this is definitely something you should do. And when you consider the verbs as your first step in developing the game, it allows you to get to understanding the player quickly that, okay, player needs to know how to aim and shoot fast in order to be good at this game, or how to crouch when enemies are about to see them. So it gets quickly on into the what the player needs to learn. However, it isn't enough to just think what the player does, but then you need to consider that how does the game world respond to those verbs. Okay, I shoot someone with a bow and arrow. What happens next? Well, they need to attack us. Well, is there ways? Will they just come right at me like zombies, or is there AI deciding that will they also take bow and arrow, or will they throw something, and so forth? So how does different situation need to respond to player actions? Which leads to the other element is that, okay, if these are what player does, game world needs to respond to those verbs, but is there other ways how the game world can trigger something interesting so that game world can do proactively some elements? And should we build some tools that can bring those elements through? Typical case, for example, what these triggers mean. Let's take that the horror game scenario. You're in a classroom, not digital like this one, and you hear some monster approaching somewhere. And you have two options as you exit the room. You can go left or you can go right. And our job is to make the game as exciting as possible. The triggers and tools mean that, okay, if player goes to the right, maybe there is a trigger that spawns the monster to different direction or different place than if the player went to the left, then there is a trigger that it spawns in some other place. Or some triggers to the enemies that if they get too much damage, the trigger activates that, now this character runs away, making them more human. These can be done by complex systems, or they can be done by triggers and launches and changing states of different elements. What are your tools to make the experience as fun as possible? So, game mode responding could be opening doors to new playable areas, uh, talking, giving new information, unlocking new interactions, or unlocking new areas, or putting a marker on your map that, hey, I need to now go there. So quest markers and so forth. So this is basically then the which will start giving you concrete things that you need to be adding as mechanics. Not coolest. One element is providing triggers for the level designers. Often complex systems like that, low health enemies flee. they can be done by AI. Like, okay, this AI, the enemy's behavior tree pattern is here, or it could be triggers by level designer. Okay, here is a bunch of enemies that will attack when player enters this place. I'll put these low health triggers for these two characters, so they might flee if they're not killed. You get variation without heavy mechanics that are very dynamic, but it's tools for level designers. Spawn enemies when entering this area and so forth. Sadly, I probably won't have time to run a separate level design lecture for you, but level design is, to my mind, the least appreciated segment of game design, which is sad. A great level design can save a mediocre game and make it good, and a bad level design can destroy a otherwise great game by bringing it to like bad level. So appreciate your level designers. It's very difficult field, and it's not appreciated as much as some other parts of game design. Moving forward for other elements. By the way, if any of these methods, if something was not clear, write them in the chat. Then challenges. This is what my mentor Ernest Adams back in the days taught me, and you can find more details about it on Fundamentals of Game Design, a really heavy book on 700 pages on game design and game development. The logic with analyzing what challenges your game provides is that when game offers you challenge and you overcome it, you will feel good about yourself. And when you feel good about yourself succeeding in a challenge, you will like the game because the game made you feel good about yourself. And Ernest Adams lists several categories. And my personal tool and secret, if a game company asks me to come help with game design issues, and I read their game design documentation and I play the demo, I often stop to ponder that, okay, they clearly tried to have this type of challenges. Are they the challenges that this demo actually is providing? Because oftentimes when there is a conflict, it leads to frustration. That maybe it's not physical coordination challenge that they're actually after, but the controls are so difficult, so it actually provides physical coordination challenge instead of some conflict challenge or whatnot. So Ernest Adams lists exactly the categories that I put onto your spreadsheet exercise. So there is more of those in the Excel that I shared to you guys, but here is the main category list. So physical coordination challenges like in Super Mario, pattern recognition challenges, memory and knowledge challenges, conflict. I'm trying to do something and the enemies are trying to do something. Who wins or who manages to kill the other first or whatnot. Conceptual reasoning challenges, formal logic challenges, time pressure. Time pressure I want to emphasize particularly as it's a cool, supportive, extra challenge category. Overall difficulty level to do something is one thing. That relies heavily on, in the player motivations, the challenge motivation. But making simple tasks fun can be achieved by time pressure. So if a simple thing, but I need to do it lightning fast, that can still be super fun. Even if unlimited time, I would have no problem performing. Exploration challenges, economic challenges, creation and construction challenges, and so forth. And you should always aim to have as many, well, not always as many as possible, but several different challenges. And consider how you're using those challenges to make the game more fun. Now, as you saw in the Excel, For example, physical coordination challenges is split into speed and reaction time, like in Tetris, accuracy and precision, like Need for Speed, timing and rhythm, like Guitar Hero, and learning combination moves, like Street Fighter. And if when you're developing your game and it doesn't feel fun, consider does it provide enough variation of challenges. Oops, next slide I managed to screw it up by not having the animations. For example, Super Mario has several different challenges. Short-term goal is to stay alive, and long-term goal is to pass a level. And everyone understands that main challenge is physical coordination challenge, jumping to get forward. Mushrooms will help your long-term goal by helping you stay alive. But the big question is, why do those mushrooms always move and most of the time forward? And the answer to that is because that single thing provides conflict between short-term goal, stay alive, and long-term goal, pass a level, because you have to make a decision fast. Do you try to catch that moving mushroom, which will go into the endless pit if you don't act immediately? And there, time pressure plays the role. You don't have endless amount of time to decide is it worth the risk. And why they most of the time go forward is because it's the unknown. If it was backwards, you have been there already, so you know what is there, and it's safer that way. But forward, you don't know uh, where what lies ahead. Of course, Super Mario also has memory and knowledge challenges to find out where those mushrooms are. Exploration challenge the first time, finding where they are, and after that, memory and knowledge challenges, and then of course those skip a level kind of hidden secrets that are in thin air, not in those things that are visible for the player. So even Super Mario, simple platformer, provides a vast selection of different types of challenges. Hence, the first game when it wasn't the most successful game series out there, but there is a reason why it became such a huge hit. Now, moving forward to meaningful choices. Meaningful choices is a bit smaller approach than the previous, and it doesn't fit definitely not all games. Of course, the designing of meaningful choices is what players tend to remember if it was meaningful, but designing them is particularly hard because you would need to have right ways, whichever you go, and try not to be that this way is right and that way is wrong. So, gameplay should pose not right answers, but provide uncomparable things. So, will I take a sword or an axe? Might feel like an interesting choice, but it is a math problem if there is damage output that is higher with one, and if there is a skill level that my character can use the axe but not the sword. So it's not really a meaningful choice. Sword and armor could be, but series of interesting choices that way won't work because last time if you took armor, then you have a bad sword. The next quest is a math problem. I should next take sword so I can do more damage. So best way to consider this is Sid Meier's, who is promoting this, Sid Meier's own games. So in Civilization, there is no right answer. What should you build next? You could build an army to attack enemies, or if there is barbarians attacking, that's the right choice. But that could leave you behind science. So should you build a library so you could have more advanced technology, or workshop so that you can build faster, or maybe a diplomat so that the enemy wouldn't attack you or whatnot, or maybe a settler that there is plenty of extra space. So consider Sid Meier's approach on Walking Dead. Mechanics is not uh, very deep, but often the story involves there is an asshole character, but he's very helpful. There is the small child, is not helpful at all, but he's nice. She's nice, or other situations. Basically, game always giving you difficult to compare elements, making those decisions interesting. Then core loop. This is very similar to the verbs approach, and particularly important if you are to make free-to-play game or system soup game where mechanics roll around and go. It's still good exercise to do on premium games as well. Here is a couple of examples. Left one would be a sci-fi game where you collect resources like energy as well as metal and so forth. You use that to build up your spaceship. Then you balance where you put the energy and resources within your ship. You research new technology. You battle against other enemies, and then from the battles you also get some new resources, and up it goes. Or the right side, more system soup type of game, an actual game of mine, not so successful as I said. Oops, oh, shouldn't swing everything. So not so successful game, but that is from a Mayer game where core mechanic was done that at the heart of the game there is buildings that have either people living in them or companies operating in them. And then there is the economic model. So people go to work, they go get services from those companies, and depending on their needs, they vote for different parties. So depending on their social status, workplace, and how much services they get, they behave differently. The districts provide some services like physical environment or safety if there's a police station and so forth. And Progress Cloud unlocks new things as time goes forward. It covers 200 years. And player influences only indirectly the city. So he can or she can propose that, hey, let's build streetlights to this district. It goes into voting, and it's up to be decided. And then in council, player appeals to the political parties, which weight, which party is important, comes from the political model of the citizens. What did they vote? Player impacts the party behavior indirectly, and the party behavior also gives impact back to the game world. And then everything is resolved via events where player can micromanage some decisions and so forth and so forth. And this is how the system moves forward all the time. Now, last but not least is my own way to design games. I try to always find the key concepts which I define as core fun of the game. And the core fun basically is a central topic that has to be fun or this game is not fun. It can be a key mechanic or it can be more abstract thing, as I will show in a second. For example, Angry Birds. If the throwing of the birds is not fun, Angry Birds is not fun. In Walking Dead, if the story is not fun, Walking Dead is not fun. If the journey from Stone Age to Space Age is not fun, then Civilization is not fun. so more abstract, and then figuring out how to make the journey interesting, or core mechanics versus meta play. So in Battle Brothers, if these battles are not fun, then Battle Brothers is not fun. So if you decide that, hey, this is what the player most of the time does, or this is what where players focus is, then you start designing around the core fun. And then you can categorize it by two different elements. Basically, short term, meaning what makes it fun, and long scale, what helps it stay fun. For example, if we all went to play football on Sunday on the boot camp, objectively, we might have had as exciting moments as some Champions League football match, even if our skills are not as high as the actual professionals. But individually, it might have been as much fun. However, the long scale fun is missing. There is no national division systems, no scoring system, no players being traded, none of that. No World Cups and other endless amounts of long scale elements that tap that one match into a larger scheme of things. So depending how much fun we had, probably most of us would next time do something else. Maybe few who had the most fun would suggest that, hey, let's play again. But the long scale was missing, so most likely we would not continue playing uh, football again with the same group. This is quite easily explained, hopefully at least. We have Angry Birds, where it's one mechanics needs to be fun. So short term fun is that there is different bird orders, different bird abilities, different number of birds, different structures, bombs, balloons, different enemies, different levels. All that make the one situation more fun. And then long term, how player is rewarded is that you unlock new birds, you unlock new obstacles that early stages have only wooden structures, then you get ice, and then you get the steel and so forth. You get the star ratings, you get high score competition with your friends, and different visuals, and the mega birds, and so forth. So long term fun being that the same experience is varied so that it also feels rewarding. And once you have all this, then you can start designing features and focus on the right stuff. And why I also like to promote this to you guys is that it helps to resource the project. So if you have, for example, important stories, important part of the core fun, but you don't have a good scriptwriter, you better get that one. Or if something is reliant on good controls, but your programmers aren't really that good, better make some changes or whatnot, or get that good programmer. It also helps to market the game when you can highlight that this is it, and then it helps through every step of the development from idea level to actual choices you do on the development stage. So that was it. These lectures where there is no live audience asking questions it's always a mystery. Was it a good lecture or not? So any questions, put them into chat and I will be happy to answer. And sorry, I tend to move around as you can see. So headphones went off and I pressed some ESC on my button on my keyboard. So something happened also in the middle. But that's it. Now questions.